The evening air outside Lakewood Grand Hotel carried the faint hum of jazz from the ballroom inside. Golden lights spilled across the pavement as expensive cars lined the driveway. Emma Hayes, 38, stepped out of a modest rental sedan and smoothed down the fabric of her navy blue dress. It wasn't designer, just simple and practical like her. Inside, the lobby glittered with chandeliers and marble floors. A giant banner read, "Lakewood High Class of 2003 to 20-year reunion." Emma's heels clicked softly as she approached the check-in table. "Name?" the concierge asked without looking up. "Emma Hayes," she replied quietly. The man handed her a plain white name tag. Her name scrawled in block letters, no titles, no decorations. When she stepped into the ballroom, the noise hit her all at once. Laughter, glasses clinking, old friends shouting names across tables. For a moment she paused at the doorway, scanning the room. Clusters of people huddled together, dressed in glamorous gowns and tailored suits. Everyone seemed larger than life, their conversations bubbling with success stories. Companies founded, careers won, families raised. Emma adjusted her dress and moved toward the edge of the room. A group of classmates glanced her way, then quickly looked past her as though she were part of the decor. One woman whispered something into her friend's ear, both smirking as their eyes flicked to Emma's shoes. A man she recognized from senior year, now broad-shouldered and loud, brushed past her. "Emma, you look exactly the same," he said with a hollow smile before turning back to his group, already laughing about something else. Emma forced a small smile, pretending not to hear the murmured comments. To them, she was still the quiet girl from high school, the one who never went to Ivy League, never stayed in touch, never posted glamorous photos online. To them, she had disappeared. Emma found an empty seat at a side table near the buffet, far from the glowing center of the room. She placed her clutch neatly on the table, folded her hands, and exhaled slowly. No one noticed her arrival. No one cared. But Emma wasn't here for them. The spotlight in the ballroom dimmed, and the chatter slowly hushed. A tall figure in a scarlet sheath dress ascended the stage, her heels clicking in a rhythm that seemed rehearsed for this very moment. The MC's voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome tonight's distinguished guest, Deputy Director Claire Hayes." Applause erupted instantly. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as though a celebrity had just walked in. Claire smiled, her perfect teeth gleaming under the lights, her hand raised in a graceful wave. Emma, seated at her lonely table near the buffet, clapped politely but without energy. She watched as her younger sister, 2 years her junior, commanded the stage with the ease of a seasoned politician. Claire adjusted the microphone, her voice flowing smooth and confident. "Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to stand here tonight, not just as Deputy Director for Cyber Oversight at the Department of Justice, but as one of you, someone who grew up right here, walked these halls, and dreamed these dreams." The audience leaned in, captivated. Claire had always known how to hold a room. "And of course," she added, her eyes glimmering mischievously, "I must thank my older sister Emma. She's here tonight." Dozens of heads turned toward Emma. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, offering a stiff smile. Claire's lips curled into a flawless grin. "Emma always taught me the value of being uniquely yourself." She never followed the crowd. She paused just long enough for the room to chuckle knowingly. "And maybe that's why I found my way here, to remind myself what happens when you do follow ambition." Polite laughter rippled across the tables. Emma didn't flinch, though she felt the sting of the barb. It wasn't an outright insult, just enough for everyone to laugh without guilt. Claire continued, her tone now solemn and inspiring. "After 15 years of service in Washington, I can say with pride that leadership is about stepping into the light. About showing up, even when it's hard." The applause swelled again, thunderous this time. The chandelier sparkled above as if echoing her triumph. Emma sat silently, her hands folded in her lap. She knew this performance well. Claire wasn't just speaking to the audience. She was rewriting the story of the Hayes family, placing herself as the star, and Emma as the forgotten shadow. But Emma didn't rise to the bait. She only adjusted her sleeve, hiding the small West Point ring no one noticed. Claire had the stage. Emma still had her silence. And silence, Emma knew, could be sharper than applause. Emma shifted slightly in her chair at the far edge of the ballroom, where her table stood half hidden behind the buffet. The scent of garlic butter shrimp and seared steak drifted past as waiters weaved between tables, their trays gleaming under the chandelier light. Around her, laughter rose and fell in waves. Old friends catching up, retelling stories of prom nights and football games, as if the last 20 years had been nothing more than a commercial break. Emma took a sip of water, her glass trembling just faintly in her hand. "Emma Hayes," a voice called. She looked up. Daniel Wright stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, the same smug grin he'd worn since senior year. Time had added a little gray to his temples, but not much humility. He held a half-empty glass of whiskey in one hand. His tie loosened like he'd already won the night. "Well, well," he said smoothly. "If it isn't the prodigy herself. Or should I say, the former prodigy." Emma offered a polite smile. "Good evening, Daniel." He pulled up a chair without asking, leaning in close enough that the smell of alcohol and cologne wrapped around her. "Tell me, Emma, still chasing papers in Kansas? Or did you finally settle for something quieter?" Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm doing just fine." But Daniel wasn't finished. He chuckled, swirling the ice in his glass. "Come on, don't be shy. You were supposed to be the big one, remember? Top of the debate team, straight-ass Ivy League written all over you. And then poof." He snapped his fingers. From a nearby table, a woman in pearls leaned toward her companion and whispered just loud enough for Emma to hear. "Didn't she drop out of law school?" "What a shame," the other murmured. "She had so much potential." Their voices floated like daggers. Emma kept her face calm, though her chest tightened with heat. Daniel smirked at her silence. "You know, everyone thought you'd be running for office by now. But hey, maybe you just weren't cut out for the spotlight." Emma met his gaze, her eyes steady, her voice soft but sharp. "Not everyone needs the spotlight to matter, Daniel." For a moment he faltered. Then he laughed, loud and dismissive, before rising from the chair. "Same Emma Hayes," he said, shaking his head. "Always mysterious, never delivering." He strolled away, already catching the attention of another cluster of classmates eager to toast his latest real estate venture. Emma watched him go, her expression unreadable. She didn't rise to the bait. She didn't need to, because the truth was far greater than any of them could imagine, and silence once again was her armor. The evening had loosened into a rhythm of wine and nostalgia. Small clusters of classmates stood near the bar, laughter echoing louder with every refill. The 6-tier cake on display gleamed under the lights, untouched but admired, like a monument to excess. Emma remained at her far-off table, her posture straight, her expression calm. She had grown used to being invisible, sometimes it was easier. But invisibility never lasted long. "Wait a second, Emma Hayes," a woman in a pale blue suit said, squinting across the room. "Didn't you join the army after sophomore year?" Several heads turned toward her. "That's right," another chimed in. "I remember something about boot camp." "She left law school plans for camouflage." A man with a booming laugh added, "Oh, come on, what did she do?" "Filing paperwork. Typing reports. Maybe a lunch lady for soldiers." The group burst into laughter. The sound rolled across the room like a cheap drumbeat. Emma's hand twitched slightly on the stem of her glass, but she held steady. At that moment, Daniel Wright reappeared, leaning against the table with a smirk. See, even they remember. Our class genius turned into a... What was it? Supply clerk. He didn't expect an answer, just more laughter. Across the room, Claire stood with her admirers, pretending not to hear. Her champagne flute poised perfectly for the next toast. Emma exhaled quietly, adjusting the sleeve of her dress. Beneath the fabric, hidden from every curious eye, the silver glint of her West Point ring pressed against her skin. She glanced at the group. Daniel's smug grin, the woman's raised brow, the other's mocking smiles. For a brief second, her eyes hardened with something sharp, something earned. Then she softened her expression again, a faint smile curving her lips. Something like that, she said simply. Their laughter resumed, satisfied with their assumption. Emma rose calmly, leaving her half-empty glass behind, and walked toward the balcony doors. The room's noise dimmed behind her. Outside, the night air wrapped around her like a cloak, the stars steady above. She leaned on the railing, the cool metal grounding her. They thought she was a nobody. They thought she had wasted her life. But Emma Hayes knew the truth that lived in sealed files, coded operations, and scars no one in that ballroom could ever imagine. And for now, she would keep it that way. The balcony stretched above the resort's manicured golf course, its railing cold beneath Emma's fingertips. The muffled roar of laughter and clinking glasses seeped through the closed doors behind her. But out here, the air was cooler, cleaner. She closed her eyes briefly, listening to the distant hum of cicadas and the low rustle of trees swaying in the evening breeze. For the first time all night she could breathe. The door opened with a hiss. Thought I'd find you out here. Emma turned slightly. Daniel Wright stepped onto the balcony, his Scotch glass nearly empty, his tie now hanging loose around his neck. He leaned against the railing beside her, too close, as if the years hadn't passed at all. You always did like standing on the edge of things, he said. His grin was lazy, but his eyes, sharp, searching, betrayed something else. Emma didn't answer. She kept her gaze on the tree-lean, stars flickering faintly above. Daniel took a slow sip, then spoke with a chuckle. You had everything lined up, Emma. Valedictorian, debate champion, Harvard practically begging to take you. And then what? You threw it all away for the army. His voice carried both disbelief and resentment, as if her choice had been a personal insult. Emma's grip on the railing tightened for just a moment. Memories surged. The acceptance letter folded neatly on her desk, her father's proud smile, the look of shock when she told them she'd chosen West Point instead. Daniel's laugh was low, bitter. I still don't get it. You could have been someone. A lawyer, a senator, maybe even on TV. Instead, you vanished. Emma finally turned to him. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, steady and unwavering, cut through his drunken arrogance. I didn't vanish, she said quietly. I just stopped explaining myself. The words hung between them, sharper than glass. Daniel blinked, his smirk faltering. For a heartbeat, silence stretched, filled only by the hum of wind through the trees. Emma straightened, her posture precise, composed. She didn't need to defend herself. Not to him. Not to anyone. Daniel opened his mouth as if to reply, but no words came. He simply looked at her, bewildered, as though facing a stranger he couldn't categorize. Emma turned back toward the horizon, her voice steady, almost gentle. Not every life needs to be broadcast, Daniel. Behind them, the ballroom erupted in laughter again, muffled by the glass doors. The party carried on, oblivious. Out here on the edge of the balcony, Emma stood rooted, silent, unseen but unshaken. Emma lingered near the balcony door before finally slipping back into the ballroom. The noise washed over her again. Clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, the metallic scrape of silverware against plates. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting light on faces that hadn't changed as much as the egos behind them. She had just started moving toward her table when a familiar voice called softly, "Miss Hayes." Emma turned. An older man stood by the edge of the room, a navy blazer draped over his thin frame, his gray hair neatly combed. His eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, lit up with recognition. "Mr. Wilson," Emma said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Her old AP history teacher stepped forward, extending a hand. "I was hoping I'd find you here. Goodness, you haven't changed much at all." Emma shook his hand warmly. "You flatter me. I feel like I've aged 20 years in one night." Wilson chuckled. "That's what reunions do to us. But when I saw your name on the list, I remembered something I couldn't forget." Emma raised a brow. "Oh." He leaned in, lowering his voice just enough to cut through the room's chaos. "That paper you wrote your senior year. The Future of Asymmetric Warfare. I still think about it." Emma blinked, caught off guard. The paper had been a late-night act of rebellion, written in frustration after one of Daniel's taunts. She had barely remembered turning it in. "You read a lot into strategy for an 18-year-old, Wilson continued. "Your predictions about cyber conflicts. Well, let's just say some of them were ahead of their time." Emma inclined her head modestly. "I was just a kid with too much free time and a library card." Wilson studied her quietly, his eyes narrowing as though searching beneath the surface. "Some kids scribble theories. Others turn them into careers." He paused, his voice dipping lower. "Tell me something. Did you ever serve in special operations?" Emma stilled, her breath caught just slightly. His tone wasn't casual curiosity. It was the careful probing of someone who had heard whispers, rumors too specific to dismiss. She gave him the faintest of smiles. "You know better than to believe everything you hear, Mr. Wilson." Wilson chuckled, though his gaze never wavered. "Perhaps. But I've lived long enough to recognize when brilliance doesn't fade. It hides." Emma inclined her head politely, ending the conversation without confirming or denying. But as she walked away, his words lingered, heavier than the music thundering across the ballroom. For the first time that night, Emma felt seen, not by those who mocked, but by someone who remembered the girl who thought deeply, fought quietly, and carried truths no one else could. The reunion dragged on downstairs, but Emma had slipped away unnoticed. The elevator carried her silently to the 7th floor, its mirrored walls reflecting a version of herself she barely recognized. Quiet, unremarkable, just another guest in an ordinary navy dress. Her keycard clicked, and the hotel room door opened with a muted thud. Inside, everything looked pristine, impersonal. Beige walls, crisp white sheets, a folded bathrobe waiting on the bed. A room designed for forgettable nights. Emma locked the door, slid the security latch, and exhaled. At last, silence. She kicked off her heels, crossing to the closet where a garment bag hung innocently among the wooden hangers. Beneath it, tucked discreetly against the wall, rested a black hardshell case. No markings, no logos, just matte steel reinforced with coated latches. Her hand hovered over it for a moment. Then, with steady precision, she entered the unlock sequence. Fingerprint scan. Retinal check. Voice confirmation. Hayes, Emma. Clearance level Echo 5. The case released with a faint hiss, the interior glowing a soft blue. Inside lay the tools of a life her classmates could never imagine. A secure comms tablet, encrypted drives, a folded uniform jacket with insignia carefully hidden beneath false panels. At the center of the display blinked a series of maps and coded overlays. A red banner stretched across the screen. Emma's eyes narrowed as she scanned the feed. 4 red zones pulsed across the digital globe. Internal chatter flagged unknown actors. And one breach point. traced directly to a NATO partner's server grid. Her lips tightened. The room's stillness suddenly felt fragile, as if the very walls were listening. This was why she hadn't truly dreaded the reunion. She had bigger concerns. Concerns measured in data breaches, lives, and nations. Her encrypted phone buzzed softly inside the case. Incoming call. Command channel. Emma tapped the screen. The face of Colonel Jameson appeared, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, jaw set with urgency. "Ma'am," he said, voice brisk. "Situations shifted. Aegis protocols compromised. We need your eyes on this. Joint Chiefs want you back in D.C. within 48 hours. Emma didn't blink. She leaned closer to the screen, her voice calm, deliberate. "Understood. Send the latest intercepts. I'll review before extraction." "Already in motion," Jameson replied. "But General." His voice dropped lower, heavier. "You should know. They're calling you the fulcrum again." The call ended, leaving only the soft hum of the case's glow. Emma stared at the screen, her reflection flickering against the digital map of red zones. In the ballroom below, she was invisible. Upstairs, in the silence of a hotel room, she was the axis of something much larger, something only she could hold together. She closed the case slowly, the locks sealing with a metallic snap. Tomorrow, the reunion would go on with its speeches and toasts. But tonight, Project Aegis had already pulled her back into the shadows. And Emma Hayes had never truly left them. The case's glow pulsed faintly in the darkened hotel room, casting blue light across the walls like ripples of water. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her dress hem brushing against the carpet. Her posture straight despite the exhaustion pressing in from the night. Then a buzz. The secure comms unit blinked red. "Priority Alpha." Emma tapped the screen, and within seconds the familiar face of Colonel Jameson appeared. His uniform looked creased from hours of wear, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. Behind him, a war room flickered with shifting maps and glowing timelines. "General Hayes," he said, his tone clipped. "We've got a situation." Emma leaned forward. "Report." Jameson didn't waste a second. "NATO servers have been breached. We've confirmed hostile vectors targeting defense communication grids. They're ghosting civilian traffic to mask the infiltration. If containment fails, it cascades into cross-alliance systems. That means half the Western network could go dark," Emma finished, her voice low but steady. Jameson gave a grim nod. "And that's the optimistic scenario." Emma exhaled slowly, her hand brushing across the edge of the West Point ring hidden beneath her sleeve. She'd been here before, too many times. The tension between two worlds pressing in. One that mocked her at dinner tables, and one that depended on her to keep nations from unraveling. "What's the timeline?" she asked. 48 hours. You're ordered back in Washington no later than 0600 Monday." Jameson's eyes fixed on hers. "Joint Chiefs want your analysis on the Aegis intercepts. This isn't advisory, General. This is mandatory." Emma's pulse didn't change, though the weight of the words pressed against her chest. She nodded once. "I'll be there." Jameson hesitated, then lowered his voice. "One more thing. Intel chatter flagged your name. Someone, somewhere, leaked that you're on site at the reunion. We don't know if it's intentional disinfo or a civilian slip. Either way, it's already moving." Emma's eyes sharpened. "Who's running the narrative?" "Too early to tell. But if it sticks, the op won't just be digital. It'll get personal." The call cut abruptly, the screen fading to black. The room returned to silence, the hum of the case the only sound. Emma sat still for a long moment, her hands resting on her knees. Downstairs she could faintly hear the music shift, old pop songs, voices singing along. A world that thought she had vanished, never knowing she was holding threads they couldn't even see. 48 hours. She rose, crossed to the window, and stared down at the reunion lawn glittering with fairy lights. Her reflection in the glass stared back at her. Not the quiet, overlooked guest, but the soldier who had walked battlefields no one would ever write about. She whispered to the empty room. "Time's running again." The ballroom quieted as the MC, flushed with champagne and enthusiasm, strode back onto the stage. He tapped the microphone, his voice booming across the gilded hall. "And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, the 2003 Distinguished Alumni Award. This year's recipient is someone who has risen through the ranks of public service, a true leader in Washington, D.C. Please welcome Deputy Director Claire Hayes." The room erupted. Applause thundered. Chairs scraped as classmates leapt to their feet. Glasses clinked in toasts, and a wave of admiration surged toward the stage. Claire stepped forward, radiant in a crimson gown that caught every flicker of the chandelier. Her smile was perfectly measured, warm enough to charm, sharp enough to dazzle. She took the microphone with both hands, pausing just long enough for the applause to crest, then fall into reverent silence. "Thank you," she began, her voice carrying with practiced ease. "When I walked the halls of Lakewood High 20 years ago, I never imagined I'd be standing here tonight. From debate club to the Department of Justice, it's been a journey built on hard work, resilience, and the belief that true leadership means stepping into the light." More applause. Emma sat at her back table, hands folded, her face calm. Claire's tone softened, her eyes sweeping the crowd with practiced sincerity. "And of course I want to acknowledge my sister, Emma, who is here tonight." Heads turned. Emma felt dozens of eyes pin her in place like specimens under glass. Claire continued, her smile gleaming. "She taught me that everyone has their own path. Some of us pursue ambition, and others choose to fade away." Laughter rippled across the audience, light and polite, but sharp enough to sting. Emma didn't move. She simply pressed her fingers against the edge of her water glass until it stopped trembling. Claire leaned closer to the microphone, her voice rich with faux humility. "Not everyone can or wants to handle the spotlight, and that's okay. Because when it matters most, leadership is about showing up." The crowd clapped again, louder this time, swept into the rhythm of Claire's performance. Emma kept her gaze fixed on the stage, expression unreadable. Inside, her encrypted phone vibrated faintly inside her clutch, another secure alert flashing across its hidden screen. Project Aegis was escalating. Claire smiled into the applause, basking in the glow. Emma sat in silence, the weight of two worlds pressing against her. One sister celebrated for being visible, the other summoned for being indispensable. And neither world truly knew the other. The MC was still beaming, basking in the afterglow of Claire's speech. The band had just struck up a jazzy rendition of a pop classic, and clusters of classmates swirled onto the dance floor. Waiters moved quickly with champagne trays, their motions a blur of silver and crystal. Emma slipped quietly toward the edge of the ballroom, craving air. She stepped outside onto the terrace, where fairy lights lined the railings and laughter drifted faintly from the party inside. Beyond the manicured lawn, the night stretched wide and velvet dark, and then the ground trembled. At first it was subtle, a low vibration underfoot. A few guests glanced around, frowning as glasses rattled gently against tables. Then came the sound, deep, rhythmic, unmistakable. Whoop 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 whoop. The music inside faltered as heads turned toward the lawn. Conversations stilled. Someone whispered, "Is that a helicopter?" The noise swelled until it consumed everything. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Guests rushed to the windows, pressing hands against glass as a dark silhouette emerged from the treeline. A matte black military helicopter thundered overhead, floodlights blazing across the grass. Napkins and champagne flutes scattered as wind from the rotors whipped across the lawn. Hair flew, dresses billowed, ties snapped against collars. Panic rippled through the crowd. People ducked, shielding their eyes, stumbling back from the blast of air and light. Phones shot up instantly, screens glowing as dozens began to film. The helicopter hovered, then descended with calculated precision, its landing skids crushing the neatly trimmed grass. The door slid open. From the shadows inside, Colonel Jameson emerged in full dress uniform, ribbons gleaming against his chest. His boots hit the ground with a deliberate crunch. Without hesitation, he strode through the chaos. His gaze locked on one person only, Emma. She stood motionless at the edge of the terrace, the wind tearing at her dress, her hair whipping across her face. For the first time all evening, she did not look small. She looked immovable. The colonel halted 3 feet in front of her, squared his shoulders, and raised his hand in a crisp salute. His voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. "Lieutenant General Hayes. Ma'am, the Pentagon requires your presence. Immediate briefing." Gasps erupted across the lawn. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered against the stone. The words spread in whispers like wildfire. "Lieutenant General? General Hayes." Emma's classmates, who had mocked, dismissed, and forgotten her, stood frozen, their mouths open, their eyes wide. Claire staggered a step back, clutching her award like a lifeline, her face drained of color. Emma didn't move. She simply straightened her posture, the quiet strength of 20 years settling on her shoulders. For the first time that night, she wasn't invisible. She was undeniable. The lawn was chaos. Dresses whipping in the rotor wash, hair tangled, champagne glasses rolling across the grass. Guests stumbled back from the blast of wind, but their eyes never left Emma Hayes. She stood in the open, framed by the floodlights of the helicopter, the navy dress pressed tight against her by the force of the air. For once, the simplicity of her clothes didn't make her invisible. It made her unmistakable. Colonel Jameson's salute hung in the air like a commandment. "Lieutenant General Hayes. Ma'am, the Pentagon requires your presence. Immediate briefing." The title detonated through the crowd. Silence lasted only a second before whispers ignited like fire across dry grass. "Did he say general? She's in the military." No, that can't be right." "Emma." From the terrace steps, Daniel Wright staggered forward, his glass still clutched tightly in his hand. He looked like a man who'd just been told the earth was flat. "General," he muttered. No, Emma, come on. This is some kind of stunt." Emma met his eyes, calm, unflinching. "It's not a stunt, Daniel." Claire appeared next, her crimson gown whipping in the storm of the rotors. She pressed one hand to her hair, the other clutching her golden award. Her face was pale, her voice sharp, almost breaking. "You, a general? That's impossible. You've been gone for years. You disappeared." Emma's gaze shifted to her sister, then back to the frozen crowd. When she spoke, her voice was steady, clear, carrying over the hum of the blades. "I wasn't hiding," she said. "I was serving." The words cut clean through the noise. The whispers grew louder, awe mingling with disbelief. Phones tilted higher, recording every second. Some guests began clapping hesitantly, then stopping, unsure whether this was real or theater. Daniel shook his head violently, his smirk gone, his confidence shredded. No, I knew you. You were supposed to be something. A lawyer, a senator. You threw it all away." Emma took a step closer, her posture as precise as the salute she hadn't yet returned. Her eyes locked on his. "I didn't throw anything away, Daniel. I chose a life bigger than your expectations." His mouth opened, but no words came. Claire's grip tightened on her award, her knuckles white. For once, she had no line, no performance ready. Her carefully curated spotlight flickered, overtaken by a truth she couldn't control. Colonel Jameson lowered his salute only after Emma gave a single nod. He held out a black folder, sealed with a Pentagon insignia. The whispers turned into stunned silence again. No one in that ballroom or on that lawn would ever look at Emma Hayes the same way. The helicopter's roar still lingered in everyone's ears as Emma climbed aboard with Colonel Jameson. Flashbulbs from phones lit the night like lightning. Guests shouted questions into the wind, but Emma didn't look back. From the edge of the lawn, however, Claire Hayes didn't lower her phone. She had been recording since the moment Jameson saluted, her crimson dress now streaked with champagne, her eyes burning with something between fury and calculation. She held her phone steady, lips pressed into a thin line. And then, with one decisive swipe, she opened her podcast app and hit record. "Claire Hayes here, live from the Lakewood reunion," she said in a breathless, hushed tone designed for drama. "You won't believe what just happened. My sister, yes, that sister, the one who disappeared 20 years ago, has just been paraded out as some kind of general." Her voice tightened with faux disbelief. "But ask yourself this. Does it make sense? A woman who abandoned her education, dropped off the map, and never once spoke of service suddenly lands on a reunion lawn with a helicopter and a title? Or is this just theater, a narrative stunt?" Her words spilled out smooth as silk, sharp as knives. By the time Emma's helicopter lifted above the resort, Claire's recording was already uploading to her growing online audience. Within hours, the internet ignited. Clips of Emma standing in the floodlights, hair whipping, the colonel saluting, looped endlessly on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Captions split sharply down two camps: silent general, unsung hero, versus deep state cosplay. Totally staged. Claire's podcast episode, titled "My Sister the Myth," spread like wildfire. She posed as the rational skeptic, the insider with personal knowledge. "She was never a leader," Claire insisted in the episode. "She's spinning a fantasy, and the government is helping her do it. Ask yourselves, who benefits from this spectacle?" The attacks followed instantly. Anonymous accounts called Emma a fraud, a plant, even an actress in costume. Comment sections filled with sneers. Photoshopped rank. No record of her promotions. Obvious fake. Her sister said it best. She vanished because she couldn't handle real life. Emma sat in a dim Pentagon skiff hours later, scrolling through the storm on a secure device. The glow of headlines and comment threads lit her tired eyes. General or pretender? Viral video sparks debate. Exposed. The reunion hoax. Hayes' family rift heats up online. She rubbed her temples, her pulse steady despite the venom on the screen. She had fought in deserts, briefed NATO, led operations no one could ever acknowledge. Yet here she was, dismantled in hashtags, doubted by strangers who had never carried anything heavier than a phone. Emma closed the device. Her silence had always been her shield. But now she wondered if silence might let others, her sister included, rewrite her entirely. The Pentagon office was sterile. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, the faint hum of servers pulsing through the air. Emma sat at her desk in the secure wing, the same navy jacket from the reunion now neatly folded on a chair. Her uniform remained hidden in the locked case at her feet, as if even here she couldn't fully let it breathe. The door creaked open. "Emma!" He turned. Melissa Parks stood in the doorway, clutching a folder to her chest. Melissa looked almost exactly as she had at the reunion, soft-eyed, steady, quietly dignified, but now her face was taut with urgency. "I had to show you this," Melissa said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Emma gestured toward the chair opposite her desk. "What is it?" Melissa set the folder down, sliding it across the desk. "Proof," she said simply. Emma opened it. Inside were scanned documents, stamped and dated. She skimmed the first page and froze. Nomination for the Medal of Honor, Lieutenant General Emma Hayes. Her breath caught. She had never seen this form, not once. She looked up sharply. I thought the board never submitted it, Emma said slowly. That the process stalled. Melissa shook her head. It didn't stall. It was blocked. Emma flipped to the next page. An email chain, grainy but clear. At the top was Claire's Department of Justice email address. Subject: Medal of Honor submission. Request for withdrawal. From Claire Hayes. Note: General Hayes has expressed a strong desire for anonymity. Please do not pursue further recognition without direct consent. Emma's chest tightened. The signature at the bottom was Claire's. Precise, practiced, undeniable. Melissa's voice softened. She told the board you didn't want it. They dropped the nomination without ever contacting you. Emma's jaw tightened, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the folder. Years of silence, of being invisible, suddenly fell into place. Not just neglect but sabotage. She erased me, Emma whispered. Not just from the reunion, from history. Melissa reached across the desk, her hand hovering as if unsure whether to comfort or not. Emma, she didn't just overshadow you, she rewrote you. And now she's doing it again. Emma closed the folder carefully. Her movements deliberate, controlled. Her face betrayed nothing, but inside a storm churned. It hadn't been chance. It hadn't been oversight. Claire had clipped her wings long before Emma even had the chance to fly in public. And the world had believed her. Emma leaned back in her chair, her voice low, steady, dangerous. She wanted me forgotten. Her eyes narrowed, steel behind them. But she underestimated me. The reunion's afterglow hadn't faded. It had metastasized. What began as whispers on the lawn was now a wildfire online, in alumni circles, and even in local news outlets. Emma scrolled through the reports on a secure tablet in her Pentagon office. Her sister's voice bled through the speakers in clipped audio snippets. True leadership is about consistency. Some of us show up. Others disappear. Don't be fooled by theatrics. Real legacies aren't built in shadows. Claire's podcast had grown from commentary to a full-blown campaign. She called it the Restoration Effort, a movement to protect the integrity of the Lakewood alumni legacy. The centerpiece of her campaign. A petition signed by dozens of classmates, demanding that Emma's name be barred from any honors or recognition at the school. Claire framed it not as jealousy, but as principle. She abandoned her path, Claire declared in a live stream, the ivory glow of her home office perfectly staged behind her. She chose secrecy over service. My classmates and I refused to let myths overshadow real, visible leadership. The Hayes family story is mine to carry forward, not hers. The chat feed exploded with approval. Hearts and clapping emojis streamed up the screen. Emma closed the tablet slowly, her reflection staring back in the black glass. Melissa stood near the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. She's not just competing with you, Emma, Melissa said carefully. She's trying to delete you. Emma exhaled, her voice even but heavy. She already did once, with the Medal of Honor nomination. Now she's doing it again. Not because I failed her, but because my existence threatens her story. Melissa's eyes softened. She built her spotlight on your silence. Emma rose from her chair, her posture precise, military sharp. Then this isn't just a rivalry anymore. It's war. A war over memory, over truth. And if she thinks she can erase me, she's about to learn otherwise. Through the narrow Pentagon window, the city lights glowed faintly. Outside, the world hummed with noise and narratives. But inside Emma, something had shifted. She had lived 2 decades in silence, believing it was strength. Now, she realized silence could also be a weapon turned against her. This wasn't about applause. This was about existence. And Emma Hayes refused to be erased. The auditorium smelled faintly of polished wood and aging carpet, a space dressed up for reverence. Rows of folding chairs stretched out, filled with alumni, faculty, and even a scattering of local reporters. A banner hung across the stage in maroon and gold. Lakewood High, legacy and leadership. 20 years of excellence. Emma stood at the back, her posture straight, her uniform jacket buttoned under a cream blouse. She hadn't been invited, but that didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about permission. On stage, Claire was radiant in an ivory suit, pearl earrings catching the light. She gripped the microphone with effortless poise, her voice carrying through the hall. "Success is not about medals or mystique," Claire declared, smiling at the crowd. "It's about showing up every day, building something others can see, touch, trust. Real leadership doesn't hide, it shines." Applause rippled through the audience. Phones lifted to record. A reporter scribbled notes. Emma moved down the center aisle, her boots echoing softly against the floor. Conversations hushed, heads turned, and the crowd slowly fell silent. The alumni board chair, seated near the stage, blinked in surprise. "General Hayes," he murmured, rising halfway. Do you wish to speak?" Emma stopped at the foot of the stage, her eyes steady. 3 minutes. The chair hesitated, then gave a small nod. The microphone was handed over. Claire stiffened, her smile faltering for the first time. Emma climbed the steps deliberately, the weight of 2 decades pressing behind every step. She stood at the podium, the audience watching, waiting, holding its collective breath. She didn't launch into a speech. She opened the manila folder Melissa had placed in her hands and pulled out a single photograph. Herself in full dress uniform, standing at NATO command, a silver star gleaming at her shoulder. She held it high, steady. The room went utterly still. Lowering the photo, Emma began to speak. Her voice was even unshaken. "My name is Emma Hayes. Class of 2003. First chair in orchestra. Founder of the International Relations Club. Voted most likely to be a professor." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, tentative but real. Emma's eyes scanned the audience. "I served because I believed in a country that didn't always believe in me. I didn't wear a name badge for approval. I wore one to remind me of purpose." She set the photo down and held up another paper. Redacted operation briefs, commendation letters, evidence of the nomination Claire had buried. "These," she said firmly, "are pieces of a life lived beyond this room. Not glamorous, not loud, but real." The silence was thick, reverent. Reporters lowered their pens, simply staring. Emma paused, then spoke the words that had been waiting for years. "Some protect loudly, others protect in silence. Both matter." A hush deeper than applause filled the room, the kind that carried weight beyond sound. Emma didn't look at Claire. She didn't need to. For the first time, she wasn't shadow or myth. She was truth. And truth didn't ask for permission. For a long moment after Emma's words, the auditorium remained suspended in silence. Not emptiness, reverence. The weight of truth settled over the crowd like dust after a storm. At last, the alumni board chair rose from his seat. His voice trembled slightly as he leaned into the microphone. "It seems," he said, glancing toward Emma, "that we've made a mistake, a grave one." He adjusted his glasses, eyes lingering on the folder Emma had placed on the podium. "General Hayes, your name belongs on our wall of honor. It always did." The audience stirred, whispers growing into murmurs of agreement. A few clapped hesitantly, then more joined until the applause swelled. Not the thunderous, rehearsed kind Claire usually commanded, but something quieter, heavier, born of respect. Claire sat rigid in her chair, her flawless smile stretched thin. For once, the spotlight didn't answer to her. Melissa slipped in beside Emma at the foot of the stage, her eyes shining. "They can't bury you anymore," she whispered. Emma didn't smile. She simply nodded, her gaze steady, as though she'd known all along this moment would eventually come. Not for glory but for correction. 2 days later in Washington, the recognition grew louder. Emma sat in her secure Pentagon office, the glow of classified monitors reflecting against the glass. Colonel Jameson entered, a sealed blue and gold folder in his hand. He placed it gently on her desk. It's official. Emma opened it. Her eyes scanned the words slowly, deliberately. The President of the United States takes great pride in awarding the Medal of Honor to Lieutenant General Emma Hayes for acts of valor above and beyond the call of duty. She exhaled, not with triumph but with quiet resolve. Jameson's voice softened. South Lawn. Full ceremony. Next week. Emma closed the folder, her fingers lingering on its edge. She thought of the reunion lawn, the disbelief on her classmates' faces, the years her name had been erased in silence. It wasn't applause she wanted. It was justice. And at last, justice had found her. But deep inside, Emma knew recognition was not an ending. It was a battlefield of its own. And this war, her war, was far from over. The White House South Lawn gleamed under the spring sunlight. Its white canopy stretched taut above rows of chairs arranged with military precision. Flags stirred in the breeze, their colors vivid against the blue sky. The orchestra played softly in the background, strings swelling with restrained reverence. The audience was a mosaic of power and pride. Uniformed generals, cabinet officials, senators, veterans, and families seated side by side. Reporters lined the perimeter, cameras already flashing, lenses hungry to immortalize the moment. At the front stood the podium, draped in the presidential seal. And beside it Emma Hayes. She wore her service blues, every ribbon, every bar aligned with meticulous care. Her posture was a line of steel, her gloves crisp white against her uniform. She looked out over the crowd with the steady calm of a soldier who had walked battlefields no one would ever see. The MC's voice carried across the lawn. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. The crowd rose as the President walked to the podium. His presence was calm, deliberate, carrying the weight of office and history. He began to speak, his voice firm yet warm. Today we honor not just a soldier, but a sentinel. A woman who walked through 20 years of conflict, diplomacy, and secrecy, not seeking fame, but protecting others from its cost. Lieutenant General Emma Hayes chose silence. But today it is time we speak her name aloud. It is time we say thank you. Applause rose, steady and earnest. Not the polite clapping of alumni galas, but something grounded, unshakable. The President turned, lifting the blue ribbon from a velvet box. The Medal of Honor gleamed gold in the sunlight. With practiced care, he placed it around Emma's neck. The weight of it settled against her chest, not heavy but undeniable. For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to breathe fully, her chest rising as if released from something long held down. Cameras flashed, capturing the image that would headline newspapers across the country. The silent general revealed. In the third row, Melissa Park clapped with tears in her eyes. A few seats over, Claire sat stiffly, her face carefully neutral for the cameras, but her fingers white-knuckled against the armrest. Emma stepped to the podium once more, the medal catching the light. She didn't speak long. Her words were simple, steady. I used to believe silence was strength, that to serve meant to disappear. But I've learned something else. We don't serve for applause. Still, it's good to know we were never truly invisible. The applause swelled again, softer this time, reflective. Somewhere near the back, a young cadet stood at attention, saluting Emma with unwavering pride. Emma returned the gesture with a faint nod, her eyes glinting with something unspoken. The nation saw her now, not as a ghost, not as a myth, but as the silent general, a title that would outlast even the medal gleaming at her chest. The cafe was small, tucked on a quiet street in downtown Washington. Its windows fogged slightly from the early morning chill, and the smell of fresh espresso filled the air. A few students hunched over laptops in the corner, their headphones sealing them into their own worlds. Emma sat at a corner table, dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a gray sweater, her hair pulled back simply. No medals, no uniform, just herself. Her hands curled around a black coffee, its heat grounding her as she waited. The door opened with a chime. Claire Hayes stepped in. She wasn't polished this morning. No tailored suit, no camera-ready makeup. Her hair was pulled back into a loose braid, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She spotted Emma instantly and hesitated for half a heartbeat before walking over. "Emma," she said softly. Emma nodded, motioning to the seat across from her. "Sit." For a long moment, silence held between them. The only sounds were the hiss of the espresso machine and the clink of ceramic cups. Finally, Claire slid a small velvet box across the table. Emma frowned, opening it. Inside was a faded photograph. Two little girls in Halloween camouflage costumes, one grinning wildly, the other standing stiffly at attention, saluting with perfect seriousness. "You kept this," Emma said quietly. Claire's voice wavered. "I almost threw it away, more times than I can count. But I couldn't." Emma set the photo gently on the table. Her sister's eyes glistened, and for the first time in decades, Claire didn't look like the brilliant prosecutor or the polished public figure. She just looked human. "I spent 20 years trying to outrun your shadow," Claire confessed, her voice low, raw. "Every time I thought I'd finally built something, there was always you. Quiet. Constant. And I hated it. How much I resented you, how much I admired you at the same time." Emma didn't speak. She let the words settle. Claire's hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. "I told myself I was protecting you when I buried your name, when I blocked your medal. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. I couldn't stand living in comparison to you. So I made you disappear." Emma's gaze didn't waver. Her silence wasn't judgmental. It was listening, the kind Claire had never allowed herself to receive before. "I didn't want you gone," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. "I just didn't know how to exist next to you." For a long time Emma said nothing. She reached across the table at last, laying her hand gently over Claire's. Claire's breath hitched, as if she'd been waiting for this small act her entire life. "Then maybe now," Emma said softly, "we stop running." Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, but this time she didn't hide them. She nodded once, slowly, as if the weight of years had finally begun to lift. The rivalry hadn't ended. The wounds weren't erased. But for the first time, the sisters weren't enemies on a battlefield. They were simply two women, scarred by the same silence, daring to share it together. The training field at West Point stretched wide under a pale morning sky. Cadets in pressed uniforms marched across the grass, their footsteps a steady drumbeat of discipline. From the observation deck, Emma Hayes watched them move with a precision she remembered from her own youth. But today, she wasn't here as a student or a soldier. She was here as a teacher. Emma walked to the front of the lecture hall, her uniform crisp, her voice steady as the cadets settled into their seats. "Leadership," she began, "isn't about medals or applause or how loud your voice carries. It's about what you do when no one is watching. When recognition will never come. When the cost is only yours to carry." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. Emma's presence was not theatrical, not fiery. It was grounded, unshakable. She drew a line on the whiteboard and wrote 2 words: loud, silent. Some leaders protect loudly, visible, outspoken, rallying others. Others protect in silence, unseen, unacknowledged, but no less essential. Both matter. Both require courage. And one is not less than the other. Cadets scribbled notes, some glancing up with admiration, others with curiosity. Emma caught the gaze of a young woman in the front row, her eyes bright, hungry for purpose. Emma gave the faintest nod, a gesture she knew could change a life. For the first time in decades, Emma wasn't just carrying the weight of her service. She was shaping the hands that would carry it next. Across the country, Claire Hayes faced a different kind of classroom. She sat in a studio lined with photographs, black and white portraits of women in uniform, past and present. Her voice carried through a microphone, broadcast live to thousands. "Today we begin a new series," Claire announced. "Silent no more. Women in military leadership. Stories that were overlooked, erased, or hidden in plain sight. Stories that deserve to be told." Her tone had shifted. The sharp edge of rivalry was gone. In its place was something softer, remorse and perhaps hope. She held up a photo of Emma in her service blues. "We start with my sister. For years, I diminished her because I couldn't bear the weight of her silence. But now I choose to honor it, and honor the countless women like her who carried nations without ever being seen." The live stream chat filled with hearts, salutes, and messages of gratitude from veterans and families alike. For Claire, it wasn't redemption yet. But it was a beginning. Two sisters. Tupat. One teaching in silence, the other speaking loudly. At last, both were serving the same mission, together. The Hall of Legacy at Lakewood High smelled faintly of varnished wood and old photographs. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off rows of plaques engraved with the names of alumni who had left their mark on the world. For years, Emma Hayes had walked past these walls in silence, her absence as sharp as any presence. But today, a small crowd gathered to witness what had been denied for so long. The curtain was pulled aside with a soft rustle, revealing a new bronze plate freshly mounted into the wall. Lieutenant General Emma Hayes, Class of 2003. Medal of Honor. Defender. Mentor. Silent General. Applause rose gently from the room. Faculty, alumni, townspeople. But Emma's eyes weren't on them. They were on the group of cadets standing in uniform at the front, their expressions solemn, their eyes wide with admiration. One young cadet stepped forward, barely 19, her voice trembling. "General Hayes, your story made me believe I could serve too. That even if no one notices, it still matters." Emma's throat tightened. She placed a hand lightly on the cadet's shoulder, her voice soft but steady. "It's not about being remembered," Emma said. "It's about ensuring the right things are." The cadet nodded, her eyes glistening, and stepped back into formation. Emma lingered before the plaque, tracing the letters of her name with her fingertips. For so long, she had believed silence erased her. Now she understood. It had preserved her until the world was ready to listen. Behind her, Claire stood quietly in the crowd, not at the podium, not in the spotlight, just present. For once that was enough. Emma turned away from the wall, walking out into the crisp afternoon air. The wind carried the faint sound of cadets marching in cadence somewhere nearby. Her legacy was no longer hidden, no longer a shadow. It was alive, in the footsteps of those who would follow, in the silence that spoke louder than any applause. And for Emma Hayes, that was all it ever needed to be.